resume, right? Okay. Oops. So, for today we finished the theoretical part, okay, so the slides. And we're going to try something in practice, okay? So, we go to week 04, and we have a folder that is named QA server, buggy SQL injection, so you don't take it for your as if it were a correct code, okay? So that's actually what you find here online, okay, as usual. So today we are going to see the QA server folders. So first, what happens in case of SQL injection? Just a very theoretical case, okay, because we saw nowadays there are so many mitigations in place, so it's sort of difficult to make it work, okay? A lot of things needs to be done. But just for out of curiosity, okay, we try to see what happens in a case like this, okay? So we have a server, the usual server, the one that we developed last time. So Express, Morgan just for logging, okay, we imported some functionalities just for convenience. They are the database queries, okay? Express, okay, setup of the middleware under JSON format and so on. Get API questions, ID answer and so on, and post. So we can add answers, okay? But we already tested this code last time, right? So we just need to run it. Remember to run an example I give you or an example that you take from some other place. You need to have a package JSON and hopefully with the list of dependencies, and then hopefully a package log JSON, okay, with all the versions, the hashes and so on, okay? So npm ci clean install, just to have a good habits here in this course. But in any case, if you want to let's say, update the packages, you're free, okay? Free to do that. We already said this morning, we know about supply chain attacks, but unfortunately our resources are limited. In this course, we can only use packages publicly available, and if they have some issues, either we fix them ourselves, or we choose another package, or we accept the situation, okay? By the way, typically these vulnerabilities happens only in very specific context and so on. So, I mean, for the purpose of our course, it doesn't change anything. But if you go in production, maybe you want to think again about all the choices, not just this choice that you made for your application, okay? So, how do we run the server? We say nodemon index, right? Nodemon index MJS. Server starts, server waits. It's listening on a port. Okay, which port? It depends on the program. We say 3001. Okay, good. And then DAO MJS. DAO is basically implementing the queries, right? Sending the queries to the database and getting the answer and send it back to the main program, okay? In the form of promises, as we said last time. So select, it's fine, okay? No SQL injection is possible here. Why? No user input here, okay? No user input, no injection, for sure, okay? The only thing that can happen is somebody has played with our code, has modified our code, but I mean, that's a bigger problem than injection. Somebody has access to the development environment and your server and so on, okay? Then select from answer where question ID equal to question mark. Again, no SQL injection possible here. Why? Question ID is actually coming from the client. coming actually from outside the server. Client is the ideal situation, but in general, outside the server. But why it's not possible? Because we use the syntax, the question mark that in SQLite 3 prevents any SQL injection from happening. Because what we said in the slides, okay? And what you can check in the manual, of course, okay? What was it? Always use parameterized queries, so with the question mark, okay? This separates the commands, the SQL commands, from the data, okay? If you check question ID, it's a parameter, and it comes in, yes, it comes in here, list question, list answer by question, rec params ID. Params are the parameters coming from the client in the form of a part of a URL, right? ID is the parametric part of the URL. Even if it's a get, right? I can send any number here, any string, and this string gets included in the query, but in a way that separates the commands from the data. So I can write anything here, and nothing happens in terms of SQL commands. Let's see the third case, the post. You see here, this is buggy code, don't use, and so on. Insert into values, and you see it's a template literal. So we take the values and we directly create the SQL command. Okay, a single string that is the SQL command that will be executed. db run SQL, which is a string. Okay, of course, this is not recommended, we know, but I wanted to show you something. Okay, good. I mean, not so good, but let's try. Okay, so this is an insert. I mean, it can be any other query, depending on which query you are addressing. Of course, you need to write different code. Okay, so how do we exploit this? API HTTP. Remember the REST client. We need to send a request. In this case, we need to send a post request, right? So, I mean, this is a standard post request. Post, URL, content type application JSON, it adds a new answer, okay? Let's check the database. No, check the database here. So there are 4 tables. One is from SQLite, so we don't care. The other 3 are from us. The list of answers, the list of questions, and the users, okay? Users for later. List of answers, and so we want to add an answer, just send a request, right, as we did last time. Click. Okay, created 201, number 5, that's the answer, content length 1, it's fine. So that is what came out here, right? So we had status 201, JSON, new ID. New ID comes from the create answer. Create answer is the return new promo, is with the buggy code and so on. And basically resolve this last ID, okay? The database tells us which is the last ID, unique ID that has been inserted in the table. If you check the database, yeah, there should be a 5th row. Maybe we should, probably the extension is bad. No. So bad, right? The demo effect. There should be an answer, right? Of course, as you say, I already tried it at home. I mean, that was in the office. It is marked as modified, yeah, okay. You see, it's there, the new row, right? Okay. Probably the extension, I think it's the second one that we installed, that is the SQLite view. Maybe it's the other one that is not working that well, okay? Anyway, so we were able to see the fifth line, okay? Okay, good. So, I mean, nothing was wrong, nothing was special, there was no SQL injection, fine. I mean, things worked. In principle, the query should work. Why it shouldn't work? Actually, I already printed it here with the console log, right? Insert into answers, values, 1, Bob, etc. Fine. Good. Okay, let's try with another request. Okay, it's already prepared there. Send request, post, exactly the same. Text. Of course, you need to have a bit of fantasy because, as I told you before, with SQLite 3, the semicolon doesn't work. Okay? Because they know. And they implemented the library in order to accept only a single SQL command for each method that you call, just to prevent this issue of the SQL injection. And so we insert this text, okay, or I mean, closing what's the name, the apostrophe, and then or select a TBL table from SQLite master where blah 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 blah. Okay. Of course, I searched a little bit about which could be a good SQL command to be inserted inside an insert at a certain point. And let's see what happens. Send request, okay, 6. So the request was successful. The line has been inserted. The row has been inserted in the database. And this is the query to be executed. Insert blah, blah, values, 1, Bob, 0, date, and the text, empty, okay? Or select, etc., 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 okay? And I guess the double dash means, and the rest is a comment, so we don't run into syntax error and so on. Of course, you need to assume a little bit of what's happening on the server. If you have access to the code of the server, these things works much better, right? Because you know what the server is doing. Otherwise, you go and guess, okay? So what happened? Actually, we have in the database a new line that now it is not going to show, but we will get it in the end, I hope. Yes, question, Bob, etc. Okay. Text is questions, okay? Where is questions in the query? It was not question, right? It was the empty string, right? So now, the attacker, what can the attacker do? Well, the attacker typically can run other queries through other APIs, or maybe just use the application. Have a list of the questions. I mean, in this case, the answers, sorry. These are the answers, right? So just show the answers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's the text inside the 6th answer? That's what we wanted, the name of a table, okay? The name of one of the table in the database, okay? Because there is a table that is updated automatically by SQLite 3 that has the list of all tables present in the database. That's the way SQLite 3 handles databases, okay? Of course, we are assuming that the backend has SQLite 3, okay? This is just an example. In this way, we got the information about what's the name of one of the tables inside the database, okay? That's a successful SQL injection in the sense that we got some information out from the server that the server was not supposed to give, right? Let's try another example, a more interesting one. What is the API HTTP? Okay. Okay, text is select password from users where username is admin, limit 1, okay? Again, just guessing a little bit, okay? If it doesn't work, maybe I can send a second query, second request to the API that runs the second query, okay? So I'm assuming there's a table named users, which, by the way, is quite common, right, in applications. And there's a column named password, again, quite common, and so on, okay? Well, hopefully not so much after this course, because we want to store hashes, not password anyway. Let's try to run this. Okay, it runs. It inserted something, right? 7. Okay, so I can play here and see, well, what's the content of the database? Okay, admin password, that's the admin password, okay? But the attacker has no access to the database, right? The database is on the server side. But the attacker can what? Can, again, get a list of the answers. There are 7 answers. And the text of the 7th answer is the password for the administrator, okay? So this SQL injection attack basically allowed me to retrieve the password of the administrator, okay? Of course, I had a bit of luck with a lot of assumptions. The server is running SQL 3. The server has been written with some SQL injection vulnerabilities and so on, okay? But just to show you what can happen in a real case. I mean, this is a real server running the standard SQL 3 database. The vulnerabilities are not about this. Probably they are using some dependencies that have some issues, maybe parsing strings and stuff like that. Okay, so the problem comes from the fact that I wrote, in this time on purpose, okay, a string to be run as an SQL command that has been constructed by using pieces of information coming from outside the server. That is the problem for SQL injection, okay? As I told you, this is one of the oldest attacks that have been run on servers, on web servers, okay? Even before single-page applications existed and so on, okay? So it is, again, mitigated in many places. If you just write the same string in the same API in a different way, so as it was last time, I think there is an insert, right? Yes. So with the question marks and so on, of course, you don't get this behavior anymore. That is here, down. Okay. So just rewriting the same thing. Don't suggest anything. We already have our problem. Okay, so why is it commented? Oh, probably yes here. Okay, save. Okay, there's something missing. Function. Okay, dbrun was supposed to be after, right? Okay, save. Now it works, right? I mean, the server runs. Okay, let's try again. API, HTTP, send the same request. Okay, here you see we got this answer, error, database error during the creation of the answer. Why? Text, response, score, date, question ID. Maybe we forgot something. Let's check the server code. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Text, response, score, date, question ID. I guess Date. I didn't try this. Of course, when you don't try something, something goes wrong. I think it should go in. Respond, score, date. Well, we can debug a little bit, right? That's the SQL query, insert into answers, values. Okay. SQL answer text, answer respond score, date, question ID. Ans, okay. The name was Ans, right? So let's solve it here, like this, okay? So it's a bit difficult sometimes to debug. That's why we invite you to come to the lab so we can help you, because we can typically spot errors more quickly than you. Maybe the ChatGPT and stuff can help you. That's possible, okay? So basically, what happened? Well, actually, it happened that the code crashed, and that's why we got the error, okay? Because we used the dot something on undefined, that was answer, answer, because we only had ans, okay? And I hope now it works. Let's try. Okay, we got a new line, right? We got a new line, and now we do as if we were expecting the SQL injection to work. 8 answer, but you see that there's no password here, right? It's just the stuff that we sent, because it has been treated as data, not as a command, okay? So, of course, there's some pollution inside our database, because that's not probably a good text for the answer, okay? But at least we didn't give back the attacker any information about, in this case, the password of the administrator, okay? So, if we don't like text like this, we need to add additional constraints somewhere in the API, okay? We say, your answer cannot start by a quotation mark, or you can only use characters, alphabetic characters, numbers, and some punctuation, and so on, okay? But otherwise, I mean, people can answer whatever he, she wants. So, I mean, we cannot really prevent a user from adding its own answer, right? Okay? So actually we saw an SQL injection example, okay? I think I've never seen an issue like this at the exam, because it's so easy to avoid, right? That basically you write queries using the parametric form and everything is solved, okay? So easy to solve. But, I mean, I wanted to show you something, how to say, just for the sake of knowing that it might happen if you don't pay enough attention, okay? Nowadays, maybe there are more sophisticated attacks, and some of them will be addressed by other courses in your course of study, but let's say for the moment, for us, that's enough, okay? So it's a message, just be careful when designing APIs. And the issue that some of you, hopefully, just few of you, will have at the exam are not about SQL injection, are about all the other issues that we saw before, okay? So, not checking the authorization, not properly checking the authorization, issues about synchronization, and all the things that we saw before, okay? Okay, before we address all these different cases, let's just carry on with the example that we developed last week. And so we forget about the QA server buggy, and we stay in the folder QA server. So we stop with Ctrl+C the server in the folder that was dedicated to the buggy behavior. And we start again from the point where we left last week, okay? Of course, this is a different folder. I like to keep things separate. So every time I have a different folder, it's a different project, so I need to reinstall the packages, okay? I think that's the safest behavior you can have. So every project has its own set of packages, okay? Also for the labs and so on, probably that's good, okay? By the way, if you run out of space, because you see that the node modules folder can take quite a lot of space, like 28 megabytes, for instance, just for this very simple example and so on, just delete the node modules folder. You can recreate them, you can recreate the content whenever you want. npm ce, clean install, that's all, okay? You just need to keep the package and package lock JSON. Okay, good. So nodemon index MJS. Okay. And now we can test the content of the database. So questions, answers for question number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I already did some tests in the office, I guess. Okay. So there are answers which are exactly the same. Is it a problem? Actually, I don't know. Nobody gave me specification for designing this API and for designing my application. So I don't really know. If I don't want to have the same answers again and again, I should have a check in the API before adding the new answer, okay? It depends on the logic of the application. It's up to you. You are the designer of the application. It's like you ask the AI system, the ChatGPT and so on, design an API like this, implement it, blah, 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 blah. It implemented the API, and then you discover you can add a duplicate answer. You didn't tell the API, right? You didn't tell the AI, the ChatGPT and so on. If you tell, they will make a check, okay? So it's up to you to decide which checks make sense in your application and try to, let's say, understand which are the checks that need to be done and which are the checks that don't really create a big problem for your application, at least in the beginning, at least in the first version and so on. For instance, in our case, for the moment, having duplicate answers is not a problem. We don't care, okay? So we have no checks on the server side. So let's try to design different APIs. Okay, there's an exercise. So the text that says, design and implement a HTTP API server, starting from the template, define a set of HTTP APIs for each of the common operations on question and answer. Write them in README MD file. Okay? Operations may be actions such as list, create, add, modify, blah, blah, blah. For each API, define HTTP method, the URL, request body, response body, status code in case of success or failure, and then implement them. Okay? And test them in the end. Okay? And note, just last note, there's no single solution, and as in any programming assignment. You might have a different idea, you might want to do something a little bit different. Okay, that's fine. For instance, just the variable names, okay? These exercises are quite simple, so typically most of you will solve it in the same way, but as long as we proceed in the course, different things might be implemented differently, okay? So, define a set of APIs. So we are not going to write code now. We are going to write text in the README. Okay, that's a preview, but then we open the README. Okay, so we already have the documentation that I already wrote last time. Actually, not during the lecture, before the lectures. But you see, list question, get API questions, description, get all the questions, response body, none, get a request body, sorry, none. Get has no request body. Response, 200 OK or internal server error, generic error. Response body, an example. That's a documentation for an API, okay? For the exam, you will have a template very similar, maybe a little bit more compact because you have several APIs, okay? But in the beginning, it's good to let's say, to start from good habits, okay? So document everything. It also helps you to clarify your ideas. Get all answers to a given question by ID. So this ID, okay, is the ID of the question. Here we design the URL, and then the description, what can happen, and what's the format of the answer, okay? Again, add a new answer, and then the rest is up to us. So post API answer, description, add a new answer, request body, an object representing an answer, content type application JSON, response body, the ID of the newly created element. That's a possible choice. We could answer back with the object representing the newly created answer. That's another possibility, very common. And let's try to design a couple of APIs, okay? So let's start with the simplest one, I would say. Delete an answer, okay? So we go to the README. So before writing code, think about what you want to do, okay? So we need to decide an HTTP method, a URL, okay? And then if there is a body for the request, and what's the answer in case of success or failure, okay? And then we will implement it into the code. That's the exercise that you're going to do in the next lab, okay? So we're doing it here in the room before you go to the lab. So what's the method? Okay, we have 4 methods: get, post, put, delete. We don't ask you to use any other method in this course, okay? But they are enough, okay? Just get information, add, update, and delete, okay? So of course it's a delete. What's the URL? Well, just be coherent, right? Everything is called /API, good. And then you remember the slides, right? If you have no idea, have a look at the slides. Hopefully they are helping you, right? So actions. Yeah, I think it's this one. Delete slash the collection slash the ID, okay? That's the guideline. You can also do something different, okay? It's acceptable as long as it's unique and it makes more or less sense, okay? So the collection is delete and answers, okay? Answers, and then we need the ID. We cannot delete the whole collection, right? ID, okay? Less than and greater than sign is just a convenience way of writing things in the README. If you like writing with this syntax, which is the syntax you use with Express, it's fine, okay? As long as you make clear that that part is a parametric part, okay? The rest is fixed, but that part is a parametric part. Since we use the less and greater than sign, just be coherent again. Okay, so I think we used this, where is this sign here? No idea, I copy paste, okay? Copy paste. Okay. So in the preview, you get the delete API answer ID, and then description. Okay, I guess we forgot to, make a bullet point. Description. Delete a given answer, okay? Given answer. Identified, right? Identified by its ID, okay? You want to add something more? You can. I think this is the minimum. Okay? Of course, quite obvious, right? So, I mean, you read the API. Indeed, that's what should happen at the exam. I read the APIs, and it's quite obvious what they are doing, because you have used the name of the collection, the correct HTTP method, so I have no doubts what they are doing. Okay? Okay. Then, there's a request, right? Request body. Request body, well, actually, none. Okay? Nothing else to send, right? What should I say? You want to send the answer? Maybe you can, but it's useless, right? We already have the ID. The only thing is needed to delete the stuff from the database is the ID. Okay? You can send the ID in the body as well. Up to you. Okay? I don't want to force you, because in this course is not about just API design, it's just one of the many topics. I recommend just to be coherent, but just for you, because it's easier for you. If you decided that the ID of the object being processed in the API, it's in the URL, just stick to that convention, okay? So it's easier for you. So you don't have to search it in the body, you search it in params when you are in the server, okay? And you don't mix up things. Response body. What do you want to answer? Do we need to answer anything? Maybe the idea of the answer. Of the deleted answer. That's a possibility. Yeah. I like it more or less, yes, okay, it's fine. But remember that we also need to write the response in terms of HTTP status, okay? So response, not a response body, but the response header, okay? So, what do we answer in case of success? Well, you don't have to think so much, right? So, 200. If you don't know what to do, 200, okay, right? So, in case of success, right? Success. To see. Oops. Or, well, if I don't know what to answer, well, internal server error. For the moment, it's enough, okay? And then if you want to be more specific and you think the client needs to know, okay, you can answer something else, okay? You might say not found. Yes and no. Personally, I don't like it. Why? Because if you say not found, it gives away the information of the fact that a certain ID didn't exist, okay? Which I don't like that much. But since you delete something, and I assume you are allowed to delete the item, otherwise the API should stop you before. Okay, not before the call, but inside the API. It should check you are allowed to do this operation. So it's not so fundamental if we write not found instead of like OK or error, generic error. Okay? So you need to think which are the consequences of acting in a way with respect to another, okay? If you are giving away valuable information, maybe you want to think if you really need to or not, okay? If it's needed by your client or not. If it's needed, probably, if it's not needed, probably you should send back a generic error or some generic information, okay? Like a generic status, like a 500, okay? So, ID of the deleted answer. But actually, here we say OK or internal server error. So we need to decide what to do in both cases, okay? So 200 OK, ID of the deleted answer could work. 500 or I would say, or none in case of error, okay? None in case of error. Unless you want to give back some information about the error. This is a very simple example, so I will start from a simple situation where you don't give any information back to the client or to the requester, to the one that makes the request to the API. Okay? Okay. Looks more or less fine. Yes. Okay, so let's try to implement it. Okay? That's what you are supposed to do in the lab, right? So let's start from the index.mjs. Just copy paste something that might work, like the well, let's copy paste the post, okay? Why the post and not the get? Because the get answers back with a table, okay, from the database. All the others typically answer with a single number, that is what we decided to give back, that is the last ID or the number of changed rows and so on, okay? So just to start from a template which is more similar to what we need to code. So copy paste, so just paste. So post is delete. Don't suggest too much. ID. So up delete. API answers ID. Okay? And then I don't need this object, okay? Because we say the request body is empty. Okay? So if the request body is empty, what is the delete? Yes. We just need to implement the code, okay? DAO, what is delete answer, right? Delete answer. Yeah, delete answer. Delete answer what? The stuff that suggests is terrible, right? Where is, well, how do I get this ID? From the request. Oops, sorry. Here. Yes, you are right. Rec, params, and then ID. Okay, why ID? Because that's the name I gave to the parameter here. Okay, I wrote ID here, I write dot ID here. Okay, in params is the list of params of the URL. Okay, body is in the body and query is after the question mark. That's what we saw last time. Okay, so this new ID is probably not correct. Okay. It's not new, right? I should remember to check out how to disable the auto-completion of the copilot before coming to lectures. So, now, delete answer. Res status 200, we say 200, 201 is fine. JSON, I say ID. That's what we decided, right? Personally, I would like to tell the number of rows that have been changed, but we can fix it later, okay? And status, database error 500, fine. So await, the catch, it means that the delete answer should return a promise. Right? But I mean, it's quite obvious, and it's what we did also for the other cases. So let's take. I'm developing. No, that's the DAO. That's the wrong DAO. I want the other DAO. Okay. So that's. I guess it was already implemented to speed up the development here during the lecture. So the delete answer, it's a function, it takes an ID as a parameter, return new promise, resolve reject, delete from answer where ID equal to question mark, so it's a parametric query, and you pass the ID, okay? DB run, and remember to use function, not the arrow function, because we need to get this working here, okay? These changes, it tells you the number of rows affected by the query, okay? That for delete basically means 0 or 1 in our case, because the ID is a unique identifier, right? So if it's 0, it means it has not been found. If it's 1, it has been found. It's fine. I mean, that's how we design the function. If you have different ideas, feel free to tell me, and we can try to see what if they work or not. So we'll go back to index. So delete answer works. We got back a value that is, we say the num row changes. Num row change. Change the, okay, we don't really care. Okay? Which of course is not used unless we use it in the rest of the code. Okay? So here we need to decide, do we want to use this number, send it back to the user, or we keep it on the server and we don't care? Up to you. I would say in this specific case, maybe you can send back the information to the server, because this is an indication if it was successful or not. Okay? Even though, well, we have 200, so I mean, I'm a bit undecided. I was more decided before coming to the lecture, so maybe we should not say anything. Or maybe we should stick with the suggestion of your colleague. Just send back the ID. Let's keep it like this, okay? So now we can test the code, because we have the API and we have the server part, right? So remember to save. Of course, I saved many times, so Node won't restart the server every time I save the file on the server side. And now we test it. I hope there is already the delete. Yes. Just write delete URL number 3. Okay, let's try. Send it. Oh, error. Well, oh, I forgot to update the message, right? So, of course, the message should be error delete. Oh no, not here, sorry, not in the DAO, in the index. During the deletion. Okay? But why is going there? I have no idea, right? You too. Or maybe you have, you don't tell me typically. So let's do a little bit of debugging. It's not so bad, right? Because at a certain point on your server, you need to do a little bit of debugging, right? So I would say typically we debug with console log, okay? Because the system is complex. I mean, we can use the debugger inside the Visual Studio Code or run the server in the debugger, but it blocks the execution of the server, or the API. I mean, the subsequent APIs cannot run, and so on. So maybe a few strategically placed console logs help us in debugging, okay? So, well, I would say the best place where to put a console log is here, console log R, okay? Why here? Because the R is the message that is returned by the rejected promise. And the rejected promise rejects with the error that comes from the database. Probably it's a database issue. Maybe I mistyped something in the query and so on. Okay? So let's try to rerun the query through the API. So I send a request to the API runs the query, and I get back some information, actually not sent back in the body, but printed on the server console. Okay? So, let's try. Oh, reference error, ID is not defined. Okay? Index, MJS 67. So, index 67. Oh, JS ID, here it is. Okay? So we learned a couple of things here, right? Actually, one that I do mistakes. Okay, no, just kidding. But you see, we had the try-catch expecting the rejected promise. Actually, the try-catch also catches runtime errors in JavaScript. Okay? So one message is, first message, probably most important message when you are developing. Always print all errors in the catch, okay? So easy, right? Now it's very clear. ID is not defined. There is even the line in index.mjs, okay? Otherwise you are debugging there. What's wrong in the SQL query? Nothing. The SQL query is working, okay? Something is wrong in your code, right? So, rec params ID, params ID, save it, okay? Try again. So API, delete. Okay, got 3. Good, okay? Just note that you got the string 3, not the number 3, okay? Why? Because everything that is on the URL is a string, even if it's a number. Unless you convert it to a number. This is the JSON representation of the string that contains the digit 3. Okay? Why it's a JSON? It's written here. It's content type application JSON. And also, I wrote .json, which is perfectly fine. In our application, we use JSON to communicate between client and server and vice versa. Good. Okay? Just be aware of these facts. You want to have a number, you make sure it's a number, okay? But you can always convert between strings, numbers, and so on. Okay? So, we almost implemented it, right? I would say it's implemented. You can check what happened in the database, even though, I mean, this stuff is a bit unreliable, right? So, QADB, well, number 3 disappeared, right? Good. Okay, now I want to test it again. So, stop the server. Close the windows, okay? And I had a QA initial, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So I made an additional copy of the database, just for convenience. And that's why we are using SQLite 3. Because now we simply copy the old file, the QA initial over QA, okay, overwrite, yes, good. And the QA starts from scratch, it's clean, okay, so simple. You start again your server, and you have a DB with 4 answers, okay? So easy, no need to run queries, delete, drop all the tables, recreate all the tables, all this stuff. Just copy a file, okay? Good. So let's try again. Send request, delete. Okay, 3. Let's see if it has been updated. Yes, this time it works immediately. Okay, you see 1, 2, and 4. The 3 has disappeared. It has been deleted from the database. Okay? And you see that the response was okay. Okay? Let's send it again. So close it. Send it again. HTTP 200 OK, 3. It doesn't say not found. It doesn't say anything. Okay? Because that's the way we decided to implement the API. How to implement the API? It's up to you in your application. If you are the API designer, of course. If somebody else is doing it for you, you need to ask this somebody else. Okay? And you see that we always answer with OK and rec params ID, provided that the promise with the await is not rejected. So DAO delete from answer where ID equal to. Does it give errors? No. If the row does not exist, we will simply say this change is equal to 0. Okay? So it's up to you to decide what to do with this number. Num row changes. Maybe you want to send it back to the user? Maybe yes. Num row changes. Okay? So we try again. Okay? Stop the server. Overwrite the database. So start from the situation where the answer number 3 is present. Start the server. Send the request again. Delete. Okay. 200 OK. Number of affected rows, 1. Not that it's 1, a number, not a string. Because I gave the JSON function a number and not a string. Okay? It's not rec params ID. It's just number of, which is a number. Okay? Okay. Let's send it again. So now you trust me, but maybe not so much. You see, 1, 2, 3 has been deleted, 4. So send again. Delete. You see now the answer is 200 OK, but it's 0. Number of affected rows, 0. Okay? It's just the same API, just decided to return something different. Okay? So maybe I should update the description, right? README. ID of the deleted answer or none in case of error. No. Number of affected rows. Okay? Is it safe or not? I cannot really tell you in this very simple application. Maybe not, maybe yes, maybe you don't want to send anything back. Maybe there is already the 200 and 500, it's fine. You don't want to send anything back, it's fine. Okay? I cannot really tell you this very simple example if it's safe or not. Okay? You need to think in terms of the information that comes to a potential attacker that runs this query. Okay? If typically delete can be run only by authenticated users, right? So, and what we said before, you can delete only if you are the owner of the item being deleted. And that's a typical error at the exam. Okay? You don't check this fact. So if you are the owner, and I allow you to delete this stuff, and I say, okay, probably the body doesn't matter that much. Otherwise, I would stop you before. Okay? I will tell you not authorized, or something like this. Not authorized does not leak so much information. Does it exist or not? It has been deleted or not? Okay? In that case, you have nothing to say in the body. Okay? But I mean, this is a discussion for the last part of the course. Okay? For now, very simple. We implemented a new API. That's what you are going to do in the next lab. Okay? Yes, there is a question. Good. Great. Sorry, I didn't get it, but... Ah, 204. Oh, yes, might be. I don't want for HTTP, no content. The delete action was successful and further information needs to be supplied. Yeah, why not? Yeah, 204, it's fine. Good, thank you. I mean, it's really up to you. It's up to the API designer, okay? Actually, I think we never suggested to use 204, but I mean, as long as it's 200 something is fine, okay? Maybe you don't just use something misleading like, I don't know, multi-status, partial content, whatever, I don't know, okay? Or maybe created because it's been deleted, okay? But as long as 200 or 200 something more, which is more specific for your case, is fine, okay? Okay, thank you. So, I guess we can maybe commit these two files, and then we'll do just the second thing, that is how to vote an answer, because it's a bit more difficult. We will not finish it probably, but it's very interesting to see. Okay. The index, these two ones, right? Yes. So, delete implemented. Okay. Push. If I don't push, it's useless, right? Yes. Okay. So, let's go back to the files. Vote an answer. Okay. What does it mean, vote and answer? I know, you don't know. I mean, the whole application that we would like to develop is an application like this, okay? And next time we will discuss how to design the interface and so on. So it's an application like the Stack Overflow that my colleague a few years ago renamed in heap overrun, okay, Stack Overflow. And basically just, you know, a question with a list of answers. And then we will add buttons for deleting answer, adding an answer, editing an answer, all this kind of thing, basic operations. So at the end of the course, we have a fully working application, even though the data is very simple. Questions with list of answers and the typical CRUD operations, create, update, read and delete, with authentication at the end of the course, but you have all the basic building blocks that are needed to develop for your exam, okay? And so, in short, at a certain point, we would like to add an action that is vote, upvote, downvote, okay? So anybody can upvote or downvote the question, the answer, okay? Like on Stack Overflow. Nowadays, you have the ChatGPT. I don't know if Stack Overflow will survive or not, but anyway. So we would like to have an API to do this operation. But we are not caring about the application at the moment. We would just care about the API, okay? So think that we want to design an API to upvote an answer. Of course, assuming that we have the ID of the answer, right? Because we need to tell which answer we want to upvote. Okay? So, start from designing the URL and the method. Okay, of course it's not delete. Okay, here we will think a little bit more. That's why I chose this example. Okay, and then API answers ID. Okay, so which method do you want to use here as an HTTP method? Okay. So is it a get? No, we are not getting back information from the server. We are sending information to the server, so it's not a get. Is it a delete? Of course not, we are not deleting anything, right? So there are just two more, put and post, okay? So we need to give a bit more information about what is voting, what does voting an answer mean? Well, I would say maybe it's better to write up vote or down vote. Okay? Because vote and answer gives you a number. Okay? So it might give you the impression that you give a number that is not exactly what we wanted. Okay? Because with vote, of course, you might be using put, for instance. Put is updating something on the server. We're updating the answer, right? And since we are updating the answer with a number that we decided, it's like when I give you the grade for the exam, and that's all, right? Nobody is going to modify the vote unless it's me fixing the vote, so I need to update it again, okay? So just vote is a bit ambiguous, okay? So is it vote plus one, or is it a vote I give you a number, okay? If it's a give you a number, it's a put, okay? Just updating a property of the answer. Upvoting is a bit more difficult, right? Because upvoting means that we need to take the current number of votes, do plus one, okay, or plus something, and store it again. Remember all the story I told you before, right? When you bid for the auction, or you want to like something, okay? Well, actually, you modify something on the server depending on its previous state, okay? This is really the typical case in which you want to use the only method that says you're going to modify a state on the server, okay? And if you do it again, maybe the state is different again, okay? Because with the put, if you store, let's say, 30, second time you do put 30, you still get 30, okay? So you didn't, you modify something on the server, but it didn't depend on the previous state. It didn't depend on the actions that others did and so on, okay? So the post method is what is appropriate here, okay? Because every time you run, you might ending up in a different state on the server, okay? Not just because of you, but maybe also because of others, okay? Okay, so post API answers ID. Actually, it might work. I don't like it. Why? Because you remember the slides. We are here, right? Post docs 12. I mean, errors in the sense that we are not adding a new item. The item already exists, okay? So even though we can reuse the URL, I don't like it because I just said, well, it should be an error. It's like creating something that already exists. How do we handle this situation? Well, just modify the URL. You cannot drop the ID because you need the ID, because you need to know which answer you need to vote, right? Just add something to the URL, okay? Vote, okay? Oh, well, typically use the lower case, but okay, we solved more or less the most difficult part, right? So we decided the method, and we pay a lot of attention to HTTP methods at the exam. If you have doubts, just ask during the course, during the labs, and so on, okay? And the URL. URL is more, you have more freedom there, okay? Because, as you saw here, I mean, sometimes there are difficult situations like this. Actually, vote is an action. It's not a collection, right? But we need to differentiate it from the case in which we are creating a new object with a given ID, which would be an error, okay? Okay, so description, now since the time is running out, the AI should help me, but it doesn't help, right? Up vote, down vote, vote an answer. I will finish it later, okay? Identified by a certain ID, okay? Then, request body. That's interesting, okay? Well, we call the API vote, right? But we just say it in the description, up vote, down vote. So maybe we should give some more information about what kind of modification we would like to do, right? So +1, -1, +2, -3. Is it possible only to upvote and so on? Well, it depends on the requirements of the application. At the moment, we don't have requirements. I mean, requirements are in my mind, okay? So I want to design an application as the one I showed you, like the Stack Overflow, +1, -1, and so on, okay? Of course, you can have one API for +1 and one API for -1. So call it upvote and say, body is empty, and it always does +1. It's like the like button in Facebook, okay? If it's still there, I'm not using Facebook, okay? But maybe you want to write a more general API, so we do a better exercise, right? Okay? So it's a post. It can have a body. Say whatever you want in the body, like a body, an object. Say an object that contains this information, and information is what we want to do, right? So an object, typically you send an object because you can have keys inside, okay? Action, that's JSON. Remember to quote everything. Action, upvote, okay? Or maybe you like numbers, you write 1, okay? And because maybe you want to be able to do +2, +3, -1, and so on, okay? That's good, okay? Oh, content type application JSON, of course. Always content type application JSON. An object, I will finish it later. Response. Response body. Up to you. Again, it's like the delete. Maybe you want to know the actual number of votes. That's good. Maybe you don't care, and you will update the number of votes later with a get reading the number of votes later from the client. That's good as well. Okay? Since we have no time, we write none at the moment. Okay? And response code, I would say the same as the other, right? Is it to 1? Yes. Okay. And then we implement it. How do we implement it? Again, copy paste from post. It's a post, right? Before the listen, right? Post API answers ID vote. ID, just remember this, okay, with a semicolon, right? ID, vote. Of course, here you don't have nothing special, right? And it's not create answer, it's vote something. It's already implemented. I need to check what's the signature. Answer ID and the vote, which is a string, okay? So answer ID, it's rec params ID, rec body vote. Okay? No, this comes from the body. It's not a params. Okay? Content type application JSON. I need to send it from new ID. I'm not sure what this returns. These changes, yes. So num row changes. Okay, good. Just try. I should be vote downvote. Click. Okay, created. Well, we decided 200, 201, whatever you deem appropriate. Number of rows affected, and we should check. This was answer 1. Okay, answer 1. Score 2. Okay, let's try again. I hope it updates. Okay, I guess not. No, let it play. Okay, good. 1, and so on. Okay, what's the query? Well, you look into the DAO. There is a vote. I'll set score plus, where ID equal to. Okay, remember, question marks, always question marks because of the SQL injection. Okay, so if it's upvote 1, otherwise -1. And that's all, okay? So next time, next lecture, Thursday, we will finish working on these APIs because we talked about validation, you remember, formal validation. We are expecting upvote or downvote. We are expecting a number as the ID of the answer and so on. We didn't implement this, right? Of course, in a certain sense, it's already almost secure because the rest of the code is doing these checks. But I want to implement these checks as well because sometimes they are very useful. Okay, also just for debugging, for instance. Okay. Okay, good. Since time has run out, I think unless you have questions, that's all for today. Tomorrow in the lab and Thursday, just this week, there is still Thursday. You have the opportunity to start developing APIs for your application in the lab, so for the film application, okay? So get a list of films, add a new film, all this kind of stuff, okay? Always list, add, update, and delete, okay? The basic operations of any application working on data, okay? So no questions, so thank you for your attention for today. You'll meet my colleague tomorrow in the lab or me on Thursday, okay? For the lecture and then the lab. Okay, thank you.